Welcome to the Global Marketing Show, where we explore how language and culture impact global business. I'm Wendy Pease, your host and president of Rapport International. Let's get started. All right, welcome to another episode of the Global Marketing Show. I am chuckling. We're going to have a lot of fun. As you know, the podcast is brought to you by Rapport International, who provides foreign language written translation and spoken interpretation in over 200 languages. Lots of experience in providing that across different things that really have to be culturally adapted. And so that's a good reminder when we're going into today's tidbit from Rapport International. Remember the Harry Potter books when they came out by J.K. Rowling? I love those books when I read them. Well, they have been translated into 68 languages. And that is no small feat for the translators, considering that the books are full of unique names, made up words, made up foods, made up games, anagrams, and it's full of British cultural references. And so the translators working on these books were not only able to translate the words, but they were able to translate all the nuances, the humor, and the subtleties of J.K. Rowling's novels that readers could experience the full tale. Love that, which will bring us into talking to Mike Hubbard, who has traveled all over the world and he has helped all sorts of exporters. He's the Director of International Trade for the Economic Development Partnership of North Carolina. He joined the organization in 2014. And prior to joining EDPNC, he was the vice president of the National Council of Textile Organizations, focusing on international trade and customs issues. He's also served as a cleared advisor on the Industry Trade Advisory Committee for Textiles and Apparels at the U.S. Department of Commerce. And he headed up the American Yarn Spinners Association. So tremendous background in international trade and textiles. Mike, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm very excited. So tell me, how did you get your start in textiles?
I got my start in textiles. I was interested in trade. I was interested in international relations, and I got a job at a trade association, first with the American Yarn Spinners, which are manufacturers of yarn, not storytellers. And got started with them, and they were very focused on international trade. This is 25 years ago. Actually, when I came on board, the guy that hired me, he was kind of my mentor. They had started a yarn trading company some years before with a number of the yarn manufacturers here in the country that they sold domestically. They knew that there was a huge market outside of the U.S. They started this company to help them all sell their product overseas. And not too long after I got there, companies were dropping out one by one because they were doing so well internationally. They would hire their own team to do this. And like, well, why would I belong to this trading company when I could just do it myself? And don't have my competitors or anybody else in there. And one by one, they did that. And finally, it was down to maybe 3 or 4 companies. And they're like, we actually all have our own teams now as well. So, it put itself out of business because it was so successful, which was exactly, it's great. And I was fascinated by it. And, with textiles, obviously exports are, their survival here in this country, and that industry has had to reinvent itself over and over again. As I was coming along, CAFTA, came into force and all that. And that's when I got my customs broker license at the same time, just so, helping companies navigate those rules. They can be very complicated. My career and trade kind of fed each other all along the way.
What got you originally interested in international work?
Just always been interested in it. I always have been. International trade, internet foreign policy. It's just always been fascinating to me.
Did you travel much as a kid or have any international exposure? Or
some, not a lot, not a
yeah.
lot. I've been to Europe a couple of times, but I mean, prior to, I guess in grad school, I went to Mexico for the first time, went to Canada when I was in my 20s. It didn't have a whole lot of international travel, just a desire for it, but didn't have the opportunity so much until later on.
Yeah, good for you. I find a lot of people that I've interviewed on the podcast have either lived internationally as a kid or traveled a lot or had some international exposure in the life. So,
I say during college, I spent a semester in Germany, which was, learned German was my second language. And then in grad school, I taught business English in Russia for a semester as well. So, back in the early 90s, it was an interesting time to be there for
yeah,
sure. So,
yeah.
but yeah, just I've always been interested in international trade and foreign relations.
No, good for you. So now you're at North Carolina. So tell me what's going on down there in international trade.
Sure, sure. So real quick, the Economic Development Partnership in North Carolina was created in 2014, shortly before I came here. It was created by the state to work for the state. So we're not a state agency. It was created as a public-private partnership, sort of all the outward-facing functions that the state was doing before: business recruitment, business retention, export promotion that I do. We have a small business startup group here, and then tourism attraction as well. So my group working on international trade development, business development overseas. We've got a team of 5 managers here on the team with me, and then we have a grants manager as well. And we work with companies here in the state of any size, not startups. They're not really ready to jump into international markets yet, but smaller companies all the way up to as large as they come. Kind of our sweet spot, the companies that call us the most tend to be small to mid-sized businesses. And what we do, we start with a lot of export education first off. Just assessing the company and their level of understanding of international trade already and exports, but looking at export education, everything from compliance, what the rules are with customs and what they need to know so that they play by the rules. Customs is serious,
Yeah.
and you want to make sure they get that right. Understanding the regulatory requirements, where they're going, are there licensing requirements, are there certifications that they need to have, that sort of thing. Part of it's cultural education,
Yeah.
telling them kind of what they need to know so that you don't want to come off. Sometimes we have very innocent things we say or mannerisms or hand gestures that can be taken in a very offensive manner in another country. And the worst thing you can do is offend a potential client as soon as you walk in and they meet you, because that's not intended at all. And then part of it is also education, understanding the industry in the country that you're going to. How does it work there? How do they sell there? That sort of thing. So then what we'll do with these companies is a lot of market research, market intelligence. What do you need to know to sell in that market? Who are your competitors there? That sort of thing. We'll help them develop a written export plan, and it's either a market entry or a market expansion strategy, but having an actual plan so that they're not just going to go to a trade show and hope they meet somebody. We want to, what's your strategy for this whole process?
Okay, so it's no hope strategies.
Yeah, yes. Hope is not a strategy. So, and then, we help with the business development side, helping them find, and we have contract offices around the world as well that can help, identify partners or distributors that they could work with, that sort of thing, and help set meetings when we go to these countries. And then kind of what we're known for with a lot of companies here in the state, EDP&C will get booths at trade shows, or we will organize trade missions of North Carolina companies and take them all over the world. And again, help them set the meetings before they get there, help them sell when they're there, and kind of get situated, get them around. So that's kind of, and then we work with grants as well. We have the STEP grant, the State Trade Expansion Program through the U.S. Small Business Administration. Everything's on hiatus right now because of the shutdown, and they haven't awarded the new grants yet. But that's been huge because that will reimburse companies if they travel with us or do other things, including translation that you mentioned. Yeah, I can't overstate enough how important that is. And I saw one of the very first shows I ever went to when I was here. We had going to the Middle East, and a woman in our booth, a small company, and she had been warned, you don't want to do this. You're not going to be very successful. She translated her catalog and put it on her website into Arabic. And she had a postcard just telling who the company is and what she does. And she had it in English and she had it in Arabic. And it was fascinating as to watch people. They would come up, they speak perfect English, and they would watch where their eyes went and see which one they picked up. And she was a player, and she ended up, because she was serious about the market. It cost almost nothing. The postcard was cheap for her to do this, but she was a serious player. She got a distributor. She ended up doing very well in that market. So it makes a big difference. And
What
on your
industry?
website,
What products was she selling there?
home furnishings.
Home furnishing. Interesting. Okay. With just a postcard translated. Yeah.
It was a postcard, and then they could go to a website. They had the link there, and she had a U.S. website, with a .com. It wasn't a .ae or whatever the Indians are registered in that country, but still, it was in Arabic, and there's her product catalog, and it was, again, not expensive really to translate that and put it on there. It was just a PDF, but it was huge for her to be able to do her business.
Yeah.
And companies, ideally they get a website in that registered in that foreign country. When you're Googling, there's 200 Googles really. When you're traveling around the world, if you're in Mexico, it's going to go to every .mx site. It's not going to any American sites typically, unless you type it in specifically. So ideally, that's what you do. But at the very least, your U.S. site, if you've got it in Spanish or German, whatever your second language is, your as many languages as you want, it's helpful.
Right, right, exactly. Yeah, what are you seeing? I mean, we're talking about websites. I see a lot of people put the Google Translate plugin or they try to use AI for translation. What are you seeing in the differences of the human culturally adapted and the AI?
I may be old fashioned, but I like a human to look at it. I've seen errors before, and sometimes it's nuance, and it just makes me nervous. If I'm speaking with my friends and I make a mistake, we can laugh about it. I've done that when I was in Germany. I said something very innocent about the weather, and they all just started howling, laughing, and I apparently had said something very crude. And fortunately, it was among friends. But if it's your company, you're trying to sell your product, you want to be professional and not offensive, you want to get it right. And you don't want to have very simple grammatical errors that it doesn't look professional. And I prefer to have a human look at it. And even a lot of the companies that we've worked with here in the state translate it into the foreign language, and then they translate it back to English and see if it still kind of works both directions. I like having human eyes to look at it. A human can
Yeah.
pick up the nuance where a machine, it's getting better, but I
It's
don't
getting
trust
it's
it.
it's getting better, and there's a lot of good uses for it. Like if you're in a taxi or a restaurant or at a trade show and you're laughing about something, but anything written, yeah, we've got some leading edge automated translation, and every so often we'll do something, machine translation, send it out for post editing, just testing on our side. And the translators still come back with it all marked up. This is wrong culturally, and this is, nobody would use that word. And so,
One of the companies that we work with, doing a lot of website translations, and they talk about the Spanish and within Latin America, it's different words of common usage in Mexico versus Argentina. And then to Spain, it's completely different still. Sometimes the word for automobile, is it coche or is it auto? It depends what country you're in. And
yeah,
they maybe understand, but it just doesn't look local.
it looks clunky. And you don't
Yeah,
realize how your subconscious looks at something clunky and says, I'm going to navigate away from this. It's not like
right.
you're talking to a person. You go, oh, they used a word I normally wouldn't use, but you've got the body language going on too. So yeah, it makes a big difference. So, have you seen anybody like lose business or win business? I mean, you just talked about the postcard, but are there other examples where people have used translations to really help with business or where it's bit them?
I encourage every company, if we're at a trade show, Why not have it? It's not expensive to translate, even if it's a postcard or a business card, something that's very simple. Um, have they lost business? I can't say that necessarily, but
Mm.
there's kind of an assumption in the US that everybody speaks English, and
Yeah.
it is absolutely not true. Sometimes they just don't want to speak it, but sometimes they don't speak it. And even in Mexico, not everybody speaks English. And maybe you're at a trade show and you're speaking with somebody that their English is excellent, but they take your flyer back to their or your literature back to their company. Maybe the people in the company don't. And so, things can get you can kind of get shoved aside by the company that did have it in the local language.
I love your example of, have both languages on the flyer, and then you actually watch them to see where their eyes go, whether they read the English or the Arabic. I mean, that's fascinating to me, where you're speaking to them in English, but what do they go to read while their brain is really trying to
I,
process it?
I mean, just think of yourself. If even if you've learned another language, you
Mm.
automatically go for the English just because it's quick. I want to know quick. What is this? What does it say? And it is interesting. I've seen it many times where you just watch them and they see it and they zoom in on their own language.
Right, right, right. That's people will default exactly to what they want to read. So kinds of it. You mentioned that you work with SMEs. What size companies do you consider small and mid-sized companies?
Maybe it's easiest to say we don't work with the really tiny micro. We don't work with startups because they're just not ready to export, and sometimes the really micro company they don't have the wherewithal where you go to you export, you try to develop a market, it can take time. And even if we have a grant that's reimbursing your costs, you may still be months out, maybe a year out sometimes before you actually see a sale come from whatever it is we did, a trade show or what have you. So they need to have enough wherewithal that they can keep their company going. If they're out a couple of $1,000s, it's not going to put them out of business. We've worked with companies like my company that went to the UAE with the Arabic. She at the time she was one person in the company, and she's got employees now. She's grown, but anywhere from that all the way up, they can have 100,000, couple 100,000 in sales. Still as a newish company, all the way up to I've seen them hundreds of millions. So it runs the gamut.
Yeah, so 200,000 is still a very small company, but they come
It
in
is.
and they get the grants and the introductions and it can grow quickly.
Yeah, and the smaller the company, and small business grants are for small businesses, obviously. But sometimes the smaller the company, the more it means to them. It's that it is very impactful for what they're able to the returns that they can generate from using that money. So it's very impactful. The industries that we work with, we're very fortunate in North Carolina that we have every industry really except oil and gas production. We have everything else at scale, everything from, industries like textiles and furniture that have been here for a long, long time and are still producing quite a bit, all the way to these, the pharmaceutical, biotech, aerospace companies. And that's with our team because they specialize in these different industry sectors. They know the kind of the squirrely rules sometimes that the trade rules or just funny things about industries, whether it's textile rules, the rules of origin or auto parts, understanding that they can specialize in that. But we're fortunate that we have so many industries here.
Yeah.
There's always a lot happening.
I want to take you back to, so it's fascinating. I never put that together with North Carolina, but as you were talking about it, yeah, there's the furniture and the textiles and so that's a nice area of the country to live. Fun for you to work across
Yeah.
all the industries. And you were talking about the grants. Why do you think it's important for the government to give grants to potential exporters?
A lot of American companies don't even think about exporting because we're such a big market already.
Hmm.
But we're only 5% of the world's population. And there is a buyer for your product all over the world. It doesn't matter what it is, high end, low end, there's a buyer for that. and helping them understand, helping American companies understand that, you know, part of why you want to export is you grow your markets. Obviously, there's more money to be made, but it's also an insurance policy. If the U.S. economy slows down, the European economy may be doing well, or the Japanese economy may be taken off. So you can always it spreads your risk out a little bit, and I think the U.S. government wants to encourage that. Um, Exporting companies also tend to pay a little higher. I mean, just statistically, they tend to pay a little bit higher. They tend to, it kind of moves them off the market a little bit.
Interesting. Yeah. So that, you slow down in the US, you got another market that can do it, then you keep growing and you can pay higher wages, which is all which the Department of Commerce shows the research, the advantage of
We we,
exporting.
we have a company here in North Carolina that they manufacture boats, really nice boats,
Yeah.
and they've done extremely well. And I wish I had one because they're beautiful boats, and I don't have one. But one of our team took them overseas, and they had found a customer in Italy, and they were selling boats in Italy and doing really well. And there was the slowdown of the U.S. economy, and their business here dried up. Luxury items tend to be the first thing to suffer if you have to cut back. And it
Yeah.
was tough. And they told us it was our Italian customers that kept us up through that whole thing, and now their US business is great again, they're fine, but it was that overseas business that kept them alive in the tough times. And so they've expanded their markets now. They're in a lot of different places. But they came back and told us that. It's like that's a great story. That's what we want to hear, is that how this helped you out in the tough times.
Right, right. Those are fantastic stories. Any other unusual industries that you've seen had great success exporting?
Every industry is different, and
Yeah.
it's interesting because you can have two companies that make the same product in the same general target market, but they'll have a totally different strategy. Their risk tolerance is different, and maybe they have some different end goals. So no two days are the same coming into work. I think what's been more interesting for me is how different it is to do business in markets. And I was shocked when I'd never been to the Middle East, and we did a trade show in the UAE. I couldn't believe how easy it is to do business there.
Yeah.
It's not hard. It's just they want to do business with they want to trade with us. So intentionally they try to make it easy. I didn't know. It was my first time there as well, along with some of these companies. So that was great.
Yeah, that's fantastic. How about I remember before recording, we were talking about a medical device company that has had some interesting journeys. Well, waiting.
Yeah. So we were working with this medical device company last year, and they they're going through the process to have it FDA certified, and they're almost done with that, but it's not certified yet. So they thought, well, can we go ahead and export it as well, even if it's an over-the-counter item? And I thought, we'll sell it in Canada and Mexico. And we're working with outside partners, and we're doing a lot of market research for them, healthcare spending, obesity rates, diabetes rates, heart disease rate, all these different things. We don't have necessarily all the access. So that's where having partners is a really good thing.
Yeah.
And at this stage, Canada and Mexico are terrible markets because they would need that certification, and they need to get the certification in their home countries as well. And so they couldn't sell it. But what we found out was that they could sell it over the counter in South Africa and in the UK. Those were two markets that weren't even on the radar that would be great markets for them. They can't sell, again, it's not a registered product yet with making all the health claims, but they could go ahead and get into those markets. And the product, you see the little clips where they put it on your finger and they can tell your blood pressure and heart rate and all that. But it's a blood pressure monitor, but it's just on your finger. I guess usually it's just your heart rate. When they get it done, it'll be, home health. Anybody can check their blood pressure just by putting this little clip on your finger for a few minutes, and it'll come out. So,
Oh,
you
that's
know,
fantastic. Yeah, you don't have to know how to pump it and listen to it and do all that. It's
yeah,
just,
those of us that had to learn that in high school and did not do well in that section of PE, I was very glad to not have to pump it up and listen.
right. Or get, my arm squished because they want to get the blood pressure.
Yeah, it's a really cool product, and for all I know now, it's been a year. It may be certified now by the FDA to sell into you for doctors' offices, but for home health care and that sort of thing, people who don't know this stuff, this is a great product.
Right, right. I mean, and it's such an awesome story that you come in and you help these companies, you do the research, they do well and they leave you. So
Yeah, yeah. If we're successful, sometimes that's what happens. So that's a good thing. It can
right,
be a good thing.
right. Yeah, that's hysterical. How about failures? What happens when the companies aren't successful in going international?
Typically, we vet the companies very well before we even do anything. Before we go to a foreign market, we want to vet them and make sure they're committed, that they've done the research. So that the failures are kind of eliminated before they happen more often than not. Where we saw real downturn was when COVID hit. We had a lot of trade shows in 2019, a lot of events overseas, and great business that was coming out of that. And then COVID hit, everything stopped, and everybody was suddenly scratching their heads and having to rebuild a little bit. So having to come back and revisit these countries again, get the companies back over, and kind of reestablish that business. That took a little bit of time. I guess that not necessarily a failure, but definitely a setback.
Yeah, okay, which makes sense. Is so you vet the companies well, they're going to do the work, you're going to support them, and they get the machine rolling, and that's what gets success. But any
Yeah.
company that comes in and has to stop or doesn't continue, they haven't built the relationships.
If there's a company and the leadership of the company has no interest in it, it doesn't matter what the salesman wants to do. You need to have top down buy into this whole thing. The company needs to understand they may have to do things like labeling. Like the U.S. is very strict on labeling when products come here. Other
Yeah.
countries are as well. Even Canada, as much trade as we have with Canada, it's our biggest export market, hands down our biggest export market. You got to follow their rules. They don't just mail it back if the labels are wrong. They'll destroy it. They're busy people. There's a lot going on there, and we do the same. So, and if a company says, "Yeah, I'm not making these changes," okay, that's fine. But you're wasting your time if you're going to try to sell in different markets. Sometimes if they've got the rules set and you know what they are, you got to play by the rules.
Okay, and they're
But
going to
making
come.
sure they understand. And most companies, by the time we're talking with them too, they understand that, and they'll either say can't do it, won't do it, or don't want to, or okay, what do I need to do? And then we'll help them understand what the goals are. We have our overseas offices that can help sometimes with that, the nitty gritty details as well. What are the labeling requirements? The EU, for example, some of it's EU wide, but then you know having a label in Polish or some different language. What do you need to know?
Right, right, exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's really exciting if you decide you're going to do it and you go get the help, and then, you got your process laid out and you keep that as a initiative, you can be successful and then have like some real big home runs.
Absolutely. And so one of the things that we've started to do here, typically the companies that come to us are smaller to mid-size. The
Yeah.
bigger companies don't always need us, but very often they, I don't want to say they outgrow us, but because they still need help. And so we're starting an export accelerator here that will kick off in January. And it'll focus on the companies that have more exporting, a little bit of exporting experience, but they don't have a process. So this is a 1 year program that'll walk them through kind of systematically. How do you pick your market? Let's have contract lawyers come in and talk about contracts, and have bankers come in and talk about finance, and freight forwarders come in, kind of go through it systematically. We'll help them pick a new market. The first half of the year, we're doing all the classroom work, maybe 4 times in person, and there's a lot of individual coaching and a specific plan for their market. They're all going to have a different problem or a different objective that they want. But then the second half of the year, we get them into the market, to physically visit. There's nothing that replaces that face-to-face interaction. And you've been overseas. In the U.S., business is very transactional.
Yes.
I need something. You make it, I'm going to buy it from you. We're done. And it doesn't work that way in most of the world. And I always tell our companies, you go to Mexico, you don't have a customer until you've been to their kids' soccer game with them. They're going to know you and like you, and you're going to be friends, and you're going to, there's a relationship there, and they're going to be a great customer, but it's relationship based. You go to Japan, it's relationship. Middle East, Africa, relationship. So it's important, and that face to face is nothing replaces that.
Right, right. That's so common in the United States to think transactional. It's a huge learning curve to get up the scale of you don't talk business at dinner until the meal is done. We're thinking,
Right.
okay, you open it up as soon as the first drinks are poured and you talk through dinner and then you go, okay, goodbye, good evening, we got a deal. But it's not that way.
Business before pleasure is a very American concept. Like, no, 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 no. We're going to talk sports first. We're going to talk family, tell jokes, whatever. We'll get to business later.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good point. So I understand you had a recent trip to Finland this year and
Yes,
had a lot of great success there.
we did. I didn't get to go, unfortunately, but
Ah,
yeah, one of our trade managers led a trade mission to Finland in August, and 9 companies here from the state, and they did exceptionally well. This was a defense-focused trade mission. Um, they're still reporting back to us, and very often you go on a trade show or a trade mission, you don't have sales right away, but so far the ones that have reported do, and they've done really well. And the kinds of products that they had were really unique. Like one company makes a drone, not one that shoots at people or anything. It's like almost like a kite, but it looks like a drone, and it's on a tether, and it flies around. It takes 5 minutes to put it up in the air, and as it flies, it generates electricity, sends it back down, and so a military unit that's out in the field somewhere far away from everything. They need to run a, quickie hospital or quickie communications. They've got power. They can put it up in 5 minutes. They can take it down in 5 minutes. So that's generated a tremendous amount of interest with the Finns. The U.S. military has already looked at it very closely, and they like it a lot because it's just a great resource for them to have.
oh my
That's
gosh.
not having to ship a diesel truck out there into the middle of a field or big heavy batteries. They got this very lightweight, quick way to do it instead.
And you imagine, like, how we used to, not we, but I had any involvement, but Morse code, and you had to have these big machines, and people had to learn
Right.
that language. Now you got a little drone that's going to give you, so you can have a cell phone conversation no matter where you are in the world.
Right. I mean, it's fast. The technology's moving so fast, and there's good exchange on that. And it's interesting. We had the group that went to Finland. The Finns have already sent a group back over this month, just last week actually. There were 8 Finnish companies that came here to North Carolina and visited, and more exchange there. And so again, more companies meeting with them. We'll probably end up going back next year as
Ah,
well, just because we're building out this really nice relationship.
yeah, yeah. And what a nice way to enter the European market through Finland, and then for people to come into the US market through North Carolina, where there's so much going on there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it was really good, really, really good.
How about any crazy or embarrassing or culturally different experiences that you've had through your years? Funny.
Actually, it's more stories like horror stories I've heard from others.
Oh, I'll
but
take those too.
but
Yeah.
yeah, just the hand gestures and how you exchange a business card if you meet someone from China. You use 2 hands, and it's almost there's a process there, a ceremony almost. You're handing them, they read it, and they hand you there. You accept it with 2 hands, and you read it carefully. And we get a card, we stick it in our pocket, we don't even look at it, and
Or we write on it.
we write on it, and they view it as kind of like, he's blowing me off. He's this guy doesn't take me seriously at all, kind of disrespecting me,
Yeah.
and understanding what's in their head, and how you would do something like that. Um, when you sit in the Middle East, you don't we like to sit, we cross our leg, we got our foot up in the air. You don't show them the bottom of your foot ever. That's just, it's not, it's an insult.
Right.
How do you sit in a meeting? How do you just present yourself? And simple things like that makes a big difference.
Yeah. And how do you train people on that? Because there's so many things that you wouldn't anticipate, or do you kind of have a short list of, we're going to this country, these are the few things you need to be aware of?
Before we do a trade mission or a trade show, we always get the companies and we talk to them beforehand. Ideally, let's get them all on a Zoom call together, and let's just kind of run down some quickie things and kind of the high points, things you need to know. How do you exchange that business card, or you know, greeting people by seniority and figuring out who's the senior person. When you go in and you shake hands with the group, got to start with the right one. How do you figure that out?
Yeah.
So, it matters. So we talk to them before. It's kind of country by country.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That's so important. That's another huge service that you're offering. But, we've spent a lot of time talking about language and culture, and there's so many ways that people can do little things that make a huge difference. All right. So this question's coming because we ended the podcast with this. What is your favorite foreign word?
So German is my second language. I quickly learned the word Morgenmuffel, which is a morning grouch. Somebody, me, before I've had my coffee, I'm a Morgenmuffel. So get 2 cups and I'm a really nice guy all day long.
Glad I'm talking to you in the afternoon.
Exactly. We can't do this at 6 a.m.
Morgan Woofer. That's a new one on me. I really like that.
Morgenmuffel.
Oh, muff. How do you spell it?
Morgenmuffel.
Oh, muffle. Okay. Morgan.
One word.
Muffle.
Germans, they like to put all the words together. So Morgenmuffel.
That's a good one. That's a really good one. Well, Mike, where can people reach out to you if they want to know more about your services in North Carolina, entering into the United States, or if they want to reach people in other states that would be able to help them like you do?
Sure. So our website is always there, edpnc.com. That's for Economic Development Partnership, North Carolina.com. That has all of our different teams on there, and all of our staff, all of our phone numbers, emails are on there. If somebody watching the podcast is in another state, they need export help. All the trade people in all the different states know each other. We have a private chat group on LinkedIn. Association CITO that we get together twice a year. So, if you're in Idaho or Texas, you can still ask me, and we know who they are, and we all know how to reach each other. So happy to make introductions.
Oh, good. Well, thank you so much. So you can go on the edpnc.com website and look for Mike Hubbard, Hubbard, if you want to find him. So thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. This was fun.
Yes. Yeah. And I learned a bunch of stuff, and I loved hearing the stories. So listeners, if you enjoyed any of these stories, make sure to follow so you can hear more stories, and definitely give this episode a 5-star because it's a lot of helpful stuff. So we will catch you next time. And remember, if you have any questions about foreign language translation, reach out to Rapport International. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Global Marketing Show. We started this podcast to capture the stories of people who do global marketing and work for companies that export, since those companies have higher revenues, higher profits, higher valuations, higher salaries, and more stability, according to the U.S. Department of Commerce. If you enjoyed this podcast episode, please leave a review and subscribe. And if you know somebody who would be a good guest, introduce them to me, your host, Wendy McKenzie Pease. If you'd like to learn more about global marketing or language translation and interpretation, visit Rapport International's Resource Center at www.rapport.translations.com. Au revoir. Hasta luego. Ciao for now.